What would you do if your own brother stood in front of the entire family and claimed your grandfather's legacy as his own, knowing it was a lie? That's exactly what happened to me. 4 days after we buried Grandpa, we gathered again, this time for a housewarming party my brother Josh was throwing in Denver. New job, new girlfriend, new condo downtown with a rooftop view of the mountains. Josh liked big reveals, spotlights, center stage moments. He always had. I was sitting near the window holding a glass of sparkling cider and listening to Teresa, his girlfriend, talk about how stylish but masculine their new place was when I saw Josh raise his glass. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced, beaming. Everyone turned. Of course they did. His voice had that watch me edge. I already knew he'd planned this moment. To new beginnings, new homes, and... He paused dramatically, just enough to make people lean in. To Grandpa's memory. A respectful silence fell over the room. My chest tightened. Grandpa's death had been sudden, a stroke, no warning, no goodbye. And now we were pretending to celebrate something while he was barely cold in the ground. I raised my glass anyway, quietly, respectfully, honoring the man who had meant everything to me. But Josh wasn't done. Speaking of Grandpa, he set his drink on the coffee table. "I have an announcement." I froze. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope creased and yellowing at the edges, as if it had been folded and unfolded too many times. Something about the way he looked at me before he spoke made my stomach twist. "Before he died," Josh said, voice rising, "Grandpa gave me this letter. He wanted me to have his vacation home, the cabin by the lake." The room gasped. There was a flurry of congratulatory murmurs. Teresa clapped. My parents beamed like they'd just watched their golden child get into Yale. My cousin Jenna gave me a sharp, confused look from across the room, because she knew. She knew how close Grandpa and I had been. That cabin wasn't just a family retreat to me. It was where I'd spent nearly every weekend for the past 3 years. Helping Grandpa replace the deck slats, restock the woodshed, and clean out the dock before the first snow. Josh had visited maybe twice in 5 years, and both times he left early because there was no Wi-Fi and nothing to do. But more importantly, Grandpa had given me something 3 weeks before he died. A small, worn cedar box. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't open it, Jules. Not until the time is right." I hadn't opened it. Not even once. Because when Grandpa said something with that voice, low, quiet, serious, I listened. And now, sitting in Josh's shiny new living room, watching him wave some mysterious letter around, I felt that same voice echo in my gut. I stood up. "That's great," I said, smiling with effort. "Good for you, Josh." He grinned, basking in the attention. I turned to Jenna. She raised an eyebrow. I gave a tiny nod. I needed to leave. I needed to know. So I faked a phone call, slipped down the hall, locked myself in the guest bathroom, and breathed. That letter. It didn't make sense. Grandpa's handwriting had gotten so shaky from arthritis in his final months, he could barely sign birthday cards. But the signature I saw on that envelope, it was smooth, confident, precise. I pulled out my phone and texted Jenna. "Emmy need to check something at home. Can you cover for me?" "Jenna, say no more. You just got called into work." 3 minutes later, I was sliding out the back door while everyone was still toasting Josh's surprise inheritance. The city lights blurred as I drove. Not from speed, but from the tears I refused to let fall. Grandpa and we lived in that cabin. He taught me to fish on that lake. We spent summer nights counting constellations. He made chili over the fire pit and told me stories about his wild youth, his heartbreaks, the first house he ever bought. He didn't just love that place, he was that place. Josh announcing it as if it were some prize he'd just won at a raffle felt like desecration. When I got home, I didn't even take off my coat. I went straight to my closet, reached up to the top shelf, pulled down the cedar box. It still smelled faintly of tobacco and sawdust. Don't open it until you need to know the truth. I sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding, hands trembling, and lifted the lid. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it, several folded documents. A small brass key I recognized immediately. It opened Grandpa's antique roll-top desk at the cabin. I unfolded the first document and gasped. A notarized deed, transferring full ownership of the lake cabin. To me, dated 6 months ago. My breath caught in my throat. He'd already given it to me, officially, legally, before he died. The letter was next, the handwriting uneven, delicate, unmistakably Grandpa's. My dearest Jules. By the time you read this, I'll likely be gone. I've decided to give you the cabin while I'm still alive to avoid any complications. He went on to say how much he loved that place, how Josh never really cared for it except when it was convenient, how he'd filed everything with his lawyer, Harold Thompson. The cabin is legally yours already. This isn't part of my will or estate. I stared at those words. Josh lied. He fabricated a letter and told our entire family a story he knew wasn't true. My phone buzzed again. Josh Nice disappearing act. Don't worry, you can still visit the cabin, if you ask nicely. I stood up. No more pretending. No more silence. It was time to go back. Not with rage, not with drama, but with the truth. And the truth cuts deeper than any lie. The ride back to Josh's house felt longer than it should have. Each red light was a countdown to confrontation. I kept glancing at the passenger seat where Grandpa's cedar box sat like a loaded weapon. Not one I wanted to fire, but one I knew I might have to. I wasn't coming to blow up the party. Most guests would be gone by now anyway. That was the point. I texted Jenna as I parked 2 blocks away. Me. How many people still there? Jenna, just family now. Most left after dinner. You coming back? Perfect. I didn't need an audience. I needed clarity. And maybe, just maybe, a sliver of justice. I picked up the box and walked slowly toward the house. Each step felt heavier than the last. The box wasn't large, but it carried the full weight of Grandpa's trust and my heartbreak. When I knocked, Josh answered the door. He looked surprised, but not surprised enough. He knew I'd be back. His expression tightened lips, twitching into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Work emergency over already?" he asked. His tone said what he wouldn't. "I know you're here to ruin my moment." "We need to talk," I said evenly, stepping past him into the living room. Everyone looked up. My dad was examining Josh's letter again. My mom stood beside Teresa, still talking about potential upgrades to the cabin. Jenna sat on the edge of a chair, clearly tense, waiting. "Jules is back," my mom said brightly. "We were just discussing Josh's wonderful news about the cabin." I set the cedar box gently on the coffee table. That's what I wanted to talk about. Josh's eyes flicked down to the box. Recognition flashed across his face. His jaw tensed. "What's that?" he asked, feigning casual interest. "Something Grandpa gave me," I replied. 3 weeks ago. He asked me not to open it until the time was right. I turned to him. "I think that time is now." Before Josh could object, Dad leaned forward. "What is it, Jules?" I opened the box. Silence. Carefully, I pulled out the notarized deed and Grandpa's letter. 6 months ago, I said, voice calm but unwavering, Grandpa legally transferred the cabin to me. It's not part of his estate. I laid the deed on the table. Jenna sat forward. Teresa froze. My mom's mouth parted, but no sound came out. Dad picked up the document, adjusting his glasses. His brow furrowed. "This is notarized, and this signature is definitely your grandfather's." Josh stood frozen. His face paled. "That's impossible," he said, voice cracking. "Grandpa gave me the letter. He told me I was supposed to have it." "May I see that letter again?" I asked. Dad hesitated, then handed it over. I placed it side by side with Grandpa's real letter. The difference was glaring. Josh's letter was written in a hand too smooth, too deliberate, lacking the characteristic wobble of Grandpa's arthritis. The signature practically traced. Mom leaned in, examining both. She looked up slowly. "Josh." Her voice was hushed. "Did you forge this?" Josh didn't answer. The silence spoke for him. Teresa slowly stood. "I think I should go," she murmured, grabbing her purse. "Wait, Teresa, it's not what it looks like," Josh called after her, but the front door clicked closed behind her. Gone. The air in the room turned heavy. Dad was still studying the deed, flipping it over, confirming stamps, seals, signatures. "I don't understand," he said, finally turning to Josh. "Why would you announce this without knowing it was real? The will hasn't even been read yet." Josh flushed with embarrassment, eyes darting. I was at Grandpa's lawyer's office last week. Thompson mentioned the cabin wasn't in the estate. I figured it meant Grandpa left it to me early. He wouldn't tell me more because of confidentiality, but I knew what it meant." He swallowed. I thought, if I just announced it first, maybe what Mom pressed. Josh's voice cracked. Maybe people would believe me for once. Maybe I could finally have something that mattered to Grandpa. His words hung in the air like smoke, thick, ugly, unspoken resentment rising to the surface. I stared at him. "Everything, Josh. What are you talking about?" "You were always his favorite," Josh snapped. "Always visiting him, always fixing things, always being the perfect grandchild. The rest of us barely got a look in." Dad cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Joshy said forging a legal document is a serious offense. It wasn't about the law," Josh shouted. "It was about feeling like I mattered." He crumpled into a chair, fists clenched. The truth spilled out faster than he could stop it. "I saw the deed in Thompson's office. I figured it out. I made the letter that night. I didn't plan to use it, I swear. But then everyone was here celebrating the new house, and I wanted something bigger to announce." I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't just guilty. He was hollowed out by regret. And I remembered something. There was one thing I hadn't told anyone about. One more item in the box. I reached back in and pulled it out. A sealed envelope. Josh's name written in Grandpa's shaky scrawl. "He left something for you, too," I said softly. Josh's head lifted. "What I don't know. I wasn't supposed to open it." I handed it over. He stared at the envelope for a long moment before slowly tearing it open. He read silently, and then his shoulders slumped. His face shifted. Shock, then shame, then something else, something deeper. Regret. He knew Josh whispered. "What does it say?" Mom asked, moving closer. Josh hesitated, then handed it to her. "Read it," he said. "Everyone should hear it." She adjusted her glasses and began, "Dear Josh, if you're reading this, it means Jules has opened the cedar box, which means one of two things. Either I'm gone or something's happened that made her feel it was necessary. I've known you since the day you were born. I know your heart. You've always craved recognition. And I'm sorry if I didn't give it to you in the way you needed. But I also know you act on emotion. When you feel overlooked, you make impulsive decisions. The cabin belongs to Jules. She loved it the way I did. That's why I gave it to her. But you don't need the cabin, Josh. You need purpose. Enclosed is a check for $25,000. Use it to start something that makes your heart come alive. This isn't about fairness, it's about paths. Jules will keep the door open for you, but your journey, that's yours to build. With love and hope, Grandpa." When she finished, no one said a word. Josh clutched the check in his hand, his fingers trembling. "He saw right through me," he whispered. Dad nodded slowly. "Your grandfather was a perceptive man." Josh looked at me. Really? Looked at me maybe for the first time in years. "I'm sorry, Jules," he said. "I had no right. I wasn't ready to forgive." But I nodded. Because sometimes that's where healing begins. Josh's words echoed through the room like a confession no one was ready for. "You were always Grandpa's favorite." His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was tired, scraped raw, and somehow that hurt more than if he'd shouted it. Dad exhaled slowly and sat down beside him. Mom hovered still, holding the letter, her face a blend of concern and disappointment. Jenna didn't say anything, but she met my eyes from across the room. Her look said it all. "You okay? Was I didn't know?" Because for the first time, I saw Josh not as the self-absorbed showboat he'd always been, but as a brother who had been silently drowning in a sea of comparison and resentment. You always got everything, Josh repeated, staring at the carpet. Time with Grandpa, his attention, his stories, his trust. I blinked. You had those things too, Josh. You just didn't want them until you thought they were slipping away. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. You don't get it. By the time I realized what I was missing, it was too late. You had the bond, the traditions, the porch swing talks. I was just background. My father cleared his throat, visibly struggling to maintain composure. Josh, we all feel left out sometimes, but lying to the people who love you, it only makes it worse. Josh let out a bitter laugh. Love Mom couldn't wait to talk about cabin renovations, like it was hers. Mom opened her mouth, then shut it. Her face flushed with shame. I reached back into the cedar box. There's something else, I said quietly. They all turned toward me again. I pulled out a small photo album, worn leather corners bent. The kind of thing you kept in a drawer, not on a shelf. This was in Grandpa's desk. I didn't know he had it until I went to the cabin a few weeks ago. I opened it slowly. Photos spilled across the pages, Josh and me as kids, building sandcastles at the lake, roasting marshmallows with Grandpa fishing off the dock. In one, Josh was grinning with his front teeth missing, holding up a frog like it was a prize. Josh moved closer. His eyes darted across the pages. I don't remember most of these. He did, I said. He kept them all. I flipped to the last page. A newer photo, Josh at his college graduation, shaking hands with the dean. I thought Grandpa didn't even come to that, Josh whispered. He didn't, I said softly. But he printed the photo from your Facebook. He showed it to me the next time I saw him. Josh sat down hard like someone had knocked the wind out of him. Why didn't he ever tell me? I think he was waiting for you to come around, I said. He never stopped hoping. There was a long silence. Jenna finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. So what happens now? It was the question hanging over all of us. I closed the cedar box and rested my hands on top of it. Now we try to honor what Grandpa actually wanted. The mood in the room shifted. Tension gave way to something heavier, reflection. Josh nodded slowly. He left this for both of us, didn't he? In his way, yes, I said. The cabin, the letter, the check. He knew what we needed, not what we wanted. A few minutes later, the gathering broke up. Mom and Dad left together, quiet, thoughtful. They paused at the door, giving me long glances like they weren't quite sure how to apologize for the blind spot they'd nurtured all these years. Jenna hugged me tight. "Call me tomorrow," she whispered. "I mean it." And then, it was just me and Josh. His party had ended in a thunderclap of truth. There were half-full glasses on counters, abandoned appetizers on the kitchen island, music still playing faintly from a Bluetooth speaker no one had turned off. Josh moved around the kitchen like a ghost, filling 2 mugs with coffee we didn't really want. He set one down in front of me. "I didn't plan the forgery," he said, voice hoarse. "I found out about the deed, and I was angry. I made the letter that night. Didn't really think I'd use it. Then why did you?" He stared into his mug. "Because when everyone was here celebrating my new place, I wanted more. I wanted something important to announce, something bigger." I didn't respond. I let the silence fill the space. Silence has weight, sometimes heavier than words. He looked up. "I've always been jealous of what you had with him. You could have had it too." I said, not unkindly. "He wanted that." "I know that now," he murmured. "I just didn't know how to reach for it without feeling like I was second best." I sipped the coffee lukewarm, bitter. Josh glanced at me again. "What are you going to do with the cabin?" It was the first time he'd asked with genuine curiosity, not entitlement. I thought for a long moment. "Keep it as it is, mostly. It needs repairs, but I don't want to change its character." Josh nodded. "Good. It should stay the way he loved it. You're welcome there," I said quietly. He blinked. Even after what I did, the cabin was meant to bring family together. Not drive us apart, I said. That doesn't mean I'm not still angry or that I trust you completely. But the door is open. Josh let out a shaky breath. Thank you. We sat in silence again, not tense, not strained, just quiet. Like maybe this was a beginning, a hard one, an earned one, and maybe that was the only kind worth having. I didn't sleep much that night. Even though everything was resolved, my body didn't believe it. My chest still felt like it had been cracked open, and my mind kept replaying Josh's words, Grandpa's voice and the sound of Teresa's heels clicking as she walked out of his life. The next morning I drove. No destination at first. Just needed air, clarity, space. But I ended up exactly where I knew I would. The cabin. Grandpa's cabin. Our cabin. The sun had just begun to crest over the pine trees when I pulled into the gravel driveway. Light filtered through the needles in gold slants. The air smelled like pine sap and earth. 1,000 memories hit me all at once, as if they'd been waiting just out of reach. The porch swing still creaked in the wind. The old fishing rod still leaned by the front door. I reached into my pocket for the brass key from Grandpa's box. The lock stuck like always, and I had to jiggle it just right. Keeps the riffraff out, Grandpa had joked once, his eyes twinkling. Inside, the air was cool and still. It smelled like cedar pipe tobacco and the faint scent of lemon polish. Everything was just as he'd left it. Books on the side table, fishing gear in its corner, and a half-finished crossword on the desk. I stood in the center of the living room and let it all sink in. This wasn't just property. It wasn't even just inheritance. It was history. It was belonging. And somehow, even in the quiet, I could feel Grandpa here, watching, nodding, approving. I took out my phone and texted Jenna. Me cabin's perfect. Not sure how to feel about Josh yet. She responded instantly. Jenna. He's been calling people, trying to explain himself. Your mom's still pretty upset. Not surprised. The fallout from last night's revelations would ripple through our family for a while. You don't undo years of denial and favoritism in one evening, but there was something peaceful about knowing the truth had finally come out, that Josh's narrative had been dismantled not with anger, but with evidence, with dignity, and with love, because Grandpa had planned it that way. The cedar box, the 2 letters, the check, the key, the brag book. He hadn't just written a will, he'd written a lesson. 3 weeks passed, silence, until I got a text. Josh, can we talk at the cabin? Maybe I stared at it for a full minute before responding. Me Saturday, 10 a.m. I didn't tell anyone. When his car pulled up the driveway, I was already on the porch swing with a cup of coffee, watching the lake shimmer in the sun. He stepped out looking older than I remembered, not physically but emotionally, like a man who had finally stopped pretending he had nothing to regret. He approached slowly, holding nothing but his hands in his jacket pockets. This place hasn't changed at all, he said, looking around. That's the idea, I said, nodding to the chair across from me. He sat. We didn't speak for a moment, just listened to the wind rustle the leaves and the soft lap of water against the dock. Then he broke the silence. I've been thinking about what to say for weeks, he said, but everything sounds inadequate. Try anyway, I replied, not cold, but not overly warm either. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry, not just for the forgery, for everything, for being jealous of your relationship with Grandpa, for resenting you instead of looking at my own choices, for acting like a child when I should have been a man. I studied him. Josh was always good with words, but this felt different. Why did you really do it, I asked. The whole thing, the fake letter, the speech, all of it, the truth. He looked out at the water. I thought, if I had the cabin, it would make up for all the time I didn't spend here, like I could buy back the moments I missed. His voice cracked. Stupid, huh? No, I said. Sad. He nodded. I used the money, by the way. I blinked. The check. Yeah, Grandpa's gift. I enrolled in a woodworking class. I blinked again, surprised. Seriously? He gave a sheepish laugh. Turns out I'm terrible at it, but I like it. There's something calming about it. Cutting, measuring, creating something with your hands. I finally get what Grandpa meant. That caught me off guard. Josh, who once bailed on a camping trip because his Bluetooth speaker died, was using a chisel and sandpaper. He would have liked that, I said quietly. Josh looked down at his hands. I think he knew this would happen. All of it. The fight, the fallout. He hoped it wouldn't, I said. But he prepared in case it did. We fell silent again. Not heavy silence this time. Thoughtful. Healing. I want to show you something, I said, standing. Josh followed me inside, into Grandpa's study. I pulled out the roll-top desk key, the brass one from the cedar box, unlocked the top drawer. Inside were folders, labeled with names: Josh, Jenna, me, Mom, Dad. I pulled out the one marked Josh and handed it to him. He opened it, and I watched his face change with every page. Photos of his high school debate team, newspaper clippings of his college graduation, a screenshot of his promotion announcement last year. You kept thinking Grandpa didn't notice you, I said. You were wrong. Josh wiped his eyes. He really was proud of me. Yeah, I said. He just showed it differently. He stared at the folder. I really messed up. Yes, I said. But Grandpa believed in second chances, and so do I. I pulled out a calendar from my tote bag. I've marked weekends I'll be here, for repairs, projects. I could use an extra set of hands. His mouth twitched. Even clumsy woodworking hands, especially those. A real smile broke through his solemn expression, and for the first time in a long time I saw not the brother who competed with me, but the one who used to build blanket forts with me in Grandpa's living room. That afternoon we didn't talk about the past. Not really. We talked about sealant types for the dock, about the boathouse's crooked door frame, about which windows needed replacing before winter came, and somehow that was enough. Josh pitched ideas for restoring the old canoe Grandpa used to paddle around the lake in ideas that weren't half bad. I pulled out my sketchbook and drew quick diagrams of what needed fixing. We were quiet but not uncomfortable, focused, cooperative. And for the first time in years, we weren't opponents. We were just two siblings trying to make something last. Later, we sat on the end of the dock with our feet in the water. The lake was glassy and still broken only by the occasional ripple from a dragonfly or a leaping fish. I think Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing, Josh said after a long silence. I raised an eyebrow. You mean giving me the cabin? He shook his head. I mean giving you the responsibility. I frowned. What do you mean? Josh leaned back on his hands and looked at the sky. You didn't just inherit a piece of property, Jules. You inherited his role. You're the one who kept this place alive with him, the one who listened, who learned, who showed up. He didn't just leave you a cabin, he left you the heart of this family. I didn't answer at first. The truth of his words hit me like a stone, skipping across the surface of my chest, echoing down to my ribs. I never thought of it that way, I said eventually, but maybe you're right. Josh looked at me, really looked at me. You always made it feel like home. That's why he chose you, not because you were the favorite, because you earned it. I nodded slowly, accepting that, letting it sink in without defensiveness or guilt. And then I stood up and gestured toward the cabin. There's something I didn't show you yet, I said. In the desk. Josh followed me inside. The late afternoon light filtered through the kitchen curtains in gold bars painting the floor with warmth and memory. We walked into Grandpa's study. The cedar smell was stronger here, mixed with the faint aroma of old paper and pipe tobacco. I opened the desk drawer again and pulled out the thickest folder, the one labeled Brag Book. This is the big one, I said, placing it on the desk. Josh leaned in as I opened it. Inside were dividers, each labeled with a name. Mom, Dad, me, Jenna, Josh. Each section was filled to bursting. For me, there were photos of me and Grandpa fixing the roof copies of my environmental planning articles, a printout of the email I sent him about finishing grad school. But it was Josh's section that I flipped to. See for yourself. He sat down in Grandpa's old leather chair and turned the pages with care. There were newspaper clippings from his high school awards, a photo of him winning a science fair in 7th grade, printouts from LinkedIn. A handwritten note Grandpa had scrawled, "Josh made team lead. Proud." He stared at it in silence. "I didn't know he kept all this," he said quietly. "He kept everything I replied. He just didn't broadcast it." Josh's fingers trembled slightly as he turned the final page. It was a photo of the two of us standing side by side at the cabin 5 years ago, holding paintbrushes, our faces smudged with white primer. "Why this one?" he asked. "I found it on the wall in his bedroom last summer." He said it was the last time we all worked together on something. Said he liked being reminded it was possible. Josh closed the folder. Tears shimmered in his eyes but didn't fall. "Do you think I can still be part of this?" he asked, softly. "The cabin, I mean. Helping take care of it. Helping you take care of it." I studied him. Not the words, but the tone. He wasn't asking for property anymore. He was asking for place. "For now, I'll need you weekends," I said. "But if you show up, really show up, I'll consider letting you manage the boathouse renovations." He grinned through his tears. "That crooked thing, seriously, seriously." We laughed just a little, and it sounded like something unfamiliar but welcome, like hope. We spent the rest of the day planning. Grandpa's spirit hovered in every corner, quiet, knowing, proud. Josh asked more about Grandpa's last months. I shared stories. Some made us laugh. Some made us sit in silence. But that night, as we sat on the porch with mugs of cocoa watching the stars emerge one by one above the lake, I felt something shift. Not fixed, not perfect, but real. The kind of healing that starts with truth, is watered by regret, and grows, if you're lucky, into redemption. The next morning, Josh was gone when I woke up, but on the kitchen counter, I found a note written on the back of an old bait shop receipt Grandpa had probably left in the drawer. "Thanks for the second chance. I'll be back next weekend with power tools and maybe less attitude. Tell the boathouse I'm coming for it." "Josh," I smiled, not because everything was fine, but because for once, it might be. I stepped outside onto the porch. The air was crisp. The lake was still. A layer of mist clung to the surface like a secret the water hadn't decided to share yet. I carried my coffee to the dock and sat down. The cedar box was beside me, closed, scarred from years of use, but whole. Inside were the pieces of everything Grandpa had left behind, documents, letters, the photo album, the brag book folder I hadn't put away yet. And yet those weren't the most valuable things, the real inheritance. It was this place, this stillness, this history, and the quiet kind of strength that doesn't demand attention but endures anyway. I stared across the lake and whispered, "I'll take good care of it, Grandpa. I promise." For a long while, I just sat there, listening, thinking, feeling, not just about what had happened, but what it all meant. Josh had tried to take something that didn't belong to him, but he wasn't just trying to steal a property. He was trying to fill a void. And honestly, I understood that. We all crave belonging, legacy, proof that someone somewhere saw us and said, "Yes, you matter." But Grandpa had given both of us that in different ways. He gave me the cabin because I showed up weekend after weekend, not out of duty, but love. And he gave Josh something else, a chance to reset his path, to stop chasing approval and start chasing purpose. Not everyone gets that, and Josh nearly didn't. But he had something rare, something fragile, a sibling who was tired of competing and ready to build something better. That afternoon, I went back inside and opened the desk one more time. I pulled out a clean notebook Grandpa had tucked beside his old binoculars. Inside the front cover, in his shaky handwriting, he'd scribbled, "Start fresh. Keep track. Stay curious." I wrote the date. Then, week 1, Boathouse repairs. Josh offered to help, no guarantees on his measuring skills. I smiled and closed the book. It was the beginning of something new, not just for me, for us. The cabin would never be the same without Grandpa. But maybe that was okay, because now it was mine to protect, to preserve, to open up again on my terms. A few weeks later, Josh showed up with 2 toolboxes, a sheepish grin, and a bag of gas station donuts. We spent the day tearing out old boards from the boathouse deck. He cursed. I laughed. He measured wrong. I rolled my eyes, but he kept showing up, weekend after weekend. And one afternoon, as we painted the porch steps, he turned to me and said, "I used to think you winning meant I had to lose. But Grandpa was right. We were always meant to build different things." I nodded. "And you finally brought the right tools." He grinned. "Only took 30 years. We laughed. The sun dipped behind the trees. The lake turned gold. And for the first time since Grandpa died, I didn't feel like something had been taken. I felt like something had begun, not a return to what was, but a step into what could be. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real legacy. Have you ever been underestimated by family or had to defend what was already yours? Share your story in the comments. Let's talk about healing legacy and what it really means to win. Subscribe and join us for more family betrayal dramas every week. You never know who might be watching and who's finally ready to understand. What would you do if the people you loved most were the ones poisoning you slowly, methodically, and with a smile? My name is Christina Bennett. I'm 29 years old, a senior marketing executive based in Nashville. And for the past year, I've been quietly wondering whether I was losing my mind or if someone close to me was trying to end my career. Or worse, my life. It all came to a boiling point during a Sunday family brunch. We were at my sister-in-law Nina's house again, elegant as always. Her dining room was curated down to the napkin folds and fresh-cut hydrangeas. Everyone was laughing, passing around pastries and gossip like usual. Then James. My husband set a steaming cup of coffee in front of me. "Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you, honey?" he asked, smiling just a little too wide. His eyes didn't match the warmth in his voice. Not anymore. I stared at the cup. It smelled wrong. There was a metallic edge to the aroma. Bitter, almost chemical. My stomach churned on instinct. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Paranoia, right? But then I saw Nina sitting across from me, gently stirring her own untouched cup, her eyes flicking toward me with what I can only describe as anticipation. "James has become quite the barista lately," she said, voice sweet but too rehearsed. "He's been trying all these new brewing techniques just for you." The emphasis on "for you" landed like a threat. I smiled thinly. How thoughtful. My mind was screaming. This wasn't just a bad feeling. It was the one that had kept me alive over the past year. Ever since my 3rd unexpected trip to the ER, ever since I started to suspect that Nina's hospitality came with side effects, nausea, dizziness, rashes, and once a tremor so intense I couldn't hold a pen. "Be right back," I said, standing suddenly and pretending to check my phone. "Quick call from the office." I had no intention of making any call. As I walked around the table, I stumbled on purpose just enough to make a scene. "Oh, so sorry," I exclaimed, bumping the edge of the table and catching myself awkwardly. In the shuffle, I reached for my coffee and accidentally grabbed Nina's. She blinked. "Clumsy me," I laughed. "May I use your study?" "Nina." Her tight smile returned. "Just don't break anything in there." I walked out, clutching her cup, now not mine. I didn't go far, just into the study where I could still see the dining room through the cracked door. I waited, I watched, and then I saw it. Nina picking up the switched cup, bringing it to her lips, sipping. My heart nearly burst out of my chest. What if I was wrong? What if I'd just poisoned my sister-in-law? But as seconds passed, it became very, very clear. I wasn't wrong. Her hands began to shake. Her face paled. "James," she whispered, clutching her chest. "Something's wrong." His head snapped up. What she tried to stand wobbled. "James," she gasped, "what did you put in that coffee?" He froze. His eyes darted to the 2 cups. His expression changed, first confusion, then realization. Horror. "That wasn't your cup," he whispered. "You weren't supposed to." But his voice wasn't quiet enough. I heard every word, and so did Nina. "You switched." She breathed, staring at me through the open study door. "You knew." I stepped out, phone already in hand recording. "You always wondered if I'd figure it out," I said calmly, "but I already had." Suddenly, Nina collapsed to the floor, her body racked with tremors. James knelt beside her, panicking. "Call an ambulance, I already had. Emergency services, we need help at 1542 Maple Grove Drive. Suspected poisoning," I said into the phone. "One female conscious but experiencing seizures." Nina's eyes, usually so cold, so calculating, were filled with something new, now fear, and James, my loving husband of 3 years. He looked at me with disbelief, as if shocked that I'd outplayed him, as if shocked that I'd dared to switch the cups. "You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the board meeting," Nina hissed through clenched teeth. "You promised it wouldn't be traced." My blood ran cold. The board meeting. My board meeting. The biggest presentation of the year for the Henderson account. A deal that could secure our firm's biggest client, and one Nina had been gunning for herself. "You said we just needed to discredit her," she wheezed, doubling over. "Make her seem unreliable." I stared at James. "You tried to poison me to ruin a presentation." His silence said everything. The sirens wailed outside. Paramedics rushed in. As Nina was loaded onto the stretcher, James followed behind them, dazed and muttering excuses. I followed too, calm, composed, because the truth was already unraveling, and I had it all on tape. You don't just wake up one day and suspect your husband wants to kill you. It happens slowly, one accident at a time. Long before that brunch, before I switched the coffee cups, before the sirens and confessions, I'd already begun to lose trust in my own reality. 3 years earlier, James had swept me off my feet. We met at a friend's wedding in Nashville. He was charming, attentive, the kind of man who made you feel like the center of the universe. His family seemed warm, too, especially Nina, his cousin, but more like a sister. She ran her own marketing firm and took a special interest in me. Mentoring me, she called it. I should have seen the red flags sooner, like the accidents at formal events, her accidentally spilling wine on my new white dress at the firm's gala, or how my plate was always somehow undercooked or overspiced when she hosted dinner. Everyone laughed it off. "Nina's just a bit scatterbrained," they'd say. "And James, he always had an excuse. Maybe your stomach's sensitive or you probably had something earlier." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because if I didn't, what did that mean about my marriage? But then, the incidents got worse. The first real scare came in February. We had brunch at Nina's, just the 3 of us. Within an hour, I had severe stomach pain and dizziness. James insisted I'd probably caught a stomach bug. The ER couldn't find anything conclusive. I let it go. Then came April. We were celebrating her birthday. Nina brewed us tea herself, jasmine, with some kind of citrus. It was a beautiful afternoon until my vision blurred and I collapsed in the restroom. The ER again, blood tests, IV fluids, still no diagnosis. But Nina's reaction stayed with me. Her concern was too perfect. Her voice wavered just enough, her eyes wide but measured. And James, he seemed more annoyed than worried. That night I started a document on my phone. February 12th, Nina's brunch, stomach pain, nausea, ER visit April 3rd, Nina's birthday, tea, dizziness, blurred vision, collapse. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to track it. By June, I was hospitalized for a full weekend after eating Eggs Benedict at their house. The doctor mentioned unusual enzymes in my blood, something synthetic, nothing definitive, and still no one connected the dots. But I did. I started recording. Not everything, just little things. A comment here, a smirk there. And I bought a second phone, hidden password protected with cloud backup and a separate number. That's when I caught one of their late-night conversations. I'd woken up around 1 a.m. James wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen on the phone. "She won't back down," he whispered. "She's presenting the Henderson pitch herself." Pause. "Then we need to act soon." The next day, he told me I looked tired. Maybe I should let Nina take the meeting. "You've been under so much pressure lately," he said, brushing my hair back. "Don't burn out." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about love. It was about control, about making me small enough to be dismissed, but not so sick anyone could prove it. I also began to notice how often James visited Nina's office. He said they were working on a surprise for our anniversary. I didn't confront him. I just kept observing. One night, he left his laptop open. My hands trembled as I opened his messages. One thread with Nina stood out. They spoke in codes, bruise batches, morning mix. But one message chilled me, Nina. "She's tougher than we thought." "James, I've got something stronger this time. She won't make it to the boardroom." I sent the messages to my backup account, took screenshots, saved them to an external drive, hid it in a cosmetic bag inside a drawer only I used. But still, I hesitated. Because even with all the signs, I couldn't fully accept it. I was married to this man. Nina had once helped me pick my wedding dress. And yet, that metallic coffee smell kept coming back to me. The way she smirked whenever I excused myself early from family dinners. James's odd timing, his insistence that I take it easy whenever a big presentation loomed. It wasn't just betrayal, it was war. Silent, cruel, and calculated. But they underestimated one thing: me. I'd spent my whole life working twice as hard to be taken seriously in this industry. I dealt with being talked over in meetings, having my ideas pitched back to me by male colleagues, being told I was too intense when I stood my ground. This was just another boardroom, and I was done playing nice. They thought they'd make me sick, miss a meeting, fall behind. But what they didn't expect was that I'd make them talk. From the study, I could still see James kneeling next to Nina, who was trembling violently. Her lips were pale, her body weak. She was trying to speak, but the words slurred. And James, my husband, was in full panic mode. "That wasn't your cup," he kept muttering, like saying it enough times would erase what happened. "But you switched them." Nina croaked, staring at me, eyes wide. "You knew." I didn't deny it. I stepped forward, my phone still recording. I knew. James looked up sharply. "You, Christina, what are you doing? What I should have done months ago." The front door burst open. EMTs rushed in with equipment. I gave them space, but stayed close enough to make sure everything was captured. "My sister-in-law is experiencing severe tremors," I said calmly to one of the paramedics. "It began shortly after drinking coffee prepared by my husband. You might want to run a toxicology screen." He raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Got it. Let's stabilize her first." As they loaded Nina onto the stretcher, she gripped the medic's sleeve. "Tell them it was a mistake," she begged, voice barely audible. "Tell them." But it was too late. Her voice had already betrayed her, and I had it all on tape. James tried to follow her out. "I'll go with her to the hospital," I stepped between them. "No, I'll go. After all, she made that coffee just for me. Remember?" He blinked, stunned. "She trusted you," I added. "That was your job, right? Make it look like love." I didn't wait for an answer. I climbed into the ambulance, sat across from Nina's semi-conscious body, and didn't say a word as we sped toward Nashville General. Inside the hospital, chaos met us at the doors. Nurses, monitors, beeping machines. They wheeled Nina away. I waited quietly in the corridor, phone in my lap, thumb hovering over the replay button. 20 minutes later, a nurse called for family. James hadn't shown up yet, probably pacing somewhere, trying to figure out how to spin it. "I'm her sister-in-law," I said, following the nurse through double doors. We passed curtained bays until she led me to Nina's room. She was hooked up to monitors now. Her color had returned slightly, but her eyes flicked toward me with something unfamiliar respect, or maybe defeat. Dr. Phillips, a tall woman with calm eyes and sharp instincts, stood at the foot of the bed. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "can you tell me exactly what happened before your sister-in-law became ill?" I held up my phone. "I think you should hear this first." I hit play. The audio crackled. Then came Nina's voice. "This is all your fault. Just make her sick enough to miss the board meeting, and you promised it wouldn't be traced." I watched Dr. Phillips's expression shift from clinical interest to concern to alarm. "This is very serious," she said, making notes. "We found substances in her system that should not be in any normal kitchen or coffee. One of them is typically used in pharmaceutical testing, controlled compound." I nodded. "She's been doing this for months. So has my husband." Just then, I saw James outside the room. He stepped into the hallway, face pale and shiny with sweat. "Christina," he started, lifting his hands. "Let me explain." Dr. Phillips moved to block him. "Security to room 412, please." "This is all a misunderstanding," James pleaded. "She's confused. She didn't know what she was saying." I pulled out the screenshots from his messages. "So these texts between you and Nina discussing how to keep me out of commission were just casual banter." His mouth opened, then shut. "You went through my phone," he whispered, horrified. "After I found the syringes in your desk drawer, yes, I did." Security guards arrived. James took a step back but didn't run. He wasn't dumb, just caught. "Doctor, I said I've been to the hospital 3 times in 6 months. Same symptoms, same vague diagnoses. Can we test my blood too? See if it matches." Dr. Phillips nodded. "We'll run full comparisons." The guards kept James outside. I turned back toward Nina. She was watching all of this, silently absorbing the shift in power. Detective Mendoza arrived an hour later, a veteran investigator who'd seen every kind of domestic betrayal. She didn't flinch as I laid out the recordings, the texts, the notes from my symptom log. Her face barely moved. "You started tracking this when?" she asked. "Since February. You kept logs, every incident, time symptoms, what I ate, who was there." "I have backups too." I handed over my second phone. "There are more recordings here. You'll hear Nina saying the Henderson account was worth millions, that they just needed me to miss enough meetings for clients to doubt my reliability." Mendoza nodded slowly. "This was never about health. This was strategic sabotage, and it nearly escalated to something much worse." She wasn't wrong, because if I hadn't switched the cups, I might not be standing here. Sometimes the people closest to you wear the best masks until they slip, and when they do, you don't just see who they really are. You see what they were willing to become. James sat slumped in a hallway chair flanked by 2 security officers. He wouldn't look at me. Not directly. His hands were fidgeting in his lap like a nervous child caught in a lie too big to escape. Dr. Phillips returned with my toxicology results. Her eyes said everything before her mouth moved. "Mrs. Bennett, we found clear patterns," she said. "Elevated traces of the same synthetic compound found in Nina's system today. Lower concentrations consistent with long-term exposure. It aligns with the symptoms you reported in your hospital visits." I swallowed hard, even though I knew. Knowing and hearing it from a doctor hit differently. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet. Dr. Phillips looked toward Nina's room. "She's stabilizing, but the dosage today was dangerously high. If you'd consumed it—" She didn't need to finish. I nodded. "I understand." Detective Mendoza rejoined us, her posture calm but commanding. "We're requesting a warrant for both their homes and Nina's office. Also the pharmaceutical company where these compounds originated. Any idea how they obtained them?" "I might," I replied. James had a college friend in medical research. I overheard him mention him once, bragging that he could get anything. Mendoza made a note. "We'll follow that lead." A commotion drew our attention down the hall. James was arguing now, voice strained and frantic. "You don't understand." We were trying to help her. Mendoza stepped forward. "Help her how Mr. Bennett." "She was overworked," James insisted. pushing herself too hard, skipping meals, sleeping 3 hours a night. We thought if she got sick, maybe she'd rest. By poisoning her. No, he shouted, then lowered his voice quickly. Not poisoning, just slowing her down. Nina said if she missed a few meetings, it'd force her to take a break. I stepped in, arms crossed. Let me ask you this, James. What was the plan if I had drunk the coffee this morning? What would have happened? He couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. It wasn't about concern, it was about control, about ambition, about Nina's desperation to land the Henderson account. And James, he went along with it, because power and proximity meant more than marriage vows. Mendoza cut in sharp and unyielding. That's not protection, Mr. Bennett. That's premeditation. His shoulders sank. He looked through the hospital glass window into Nina's room. She saw him too pale, weak, terrified. Not of the police, but of exposure. It was over. Dr. Phillips re-entered holding a new tablet. Her expression had shifted from clinical detachment to quiet fury. We just got a call from a detective downtown, she said. A search of Mr. Bennett's office uncovered several vials of the same compound stored improperly, along with handwritten notes documenting what appears to be dosages and observed reactions dated and labeled. I froze. You kept records? I asked James, barely containing my rage. You treated my body like a lab experiment. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Behind us, Mendoza's voice was cold. We'll take that as a yes. 2 officers approached. Ma'am, we have what we need. They'll both be taken into custody for further questioning. James panicked. Wait, Christina. We never meant for this to get out of hand. Nina said it would just be for a little while until the account passed. Until I failed enough that I'd be forced to step aside, I replied, my voice steady. You wanted me out of the picture. He shook his head. It wasn't like that. Wasn't it? I took a step closer. What about the Christmas party? The spiked punch. The one that sent me to urgent care for dehydration and nausea silence. His eyes darted again to the floor, to the guards, anywhere but to me. I see, I said. So it was like that. Mendoza gave the signal. We're formally detaining both suspects. Charges will be discussed once all toxicology is complete. As the officers moved to restrain James, I saw something shift in Nina's room. She was sitting up now, watching everything unfold. Her face, once poised and confident, was tight with fear. She wasn't scheming anymore. She was cornered. Dr. Phillips turned toward her. The concentration in the coffee was much higher than the levels found in Mrs. Bennett's previous visits, she stated. If Christina had consumed it today, it wouldn't have been a minor reaction. It would have been fatal. Nina looked away. Mendoza moved in. Ms. Anderson, do you understand the gravity of what we're dealing with? Nina didn't answer. I stepped forward, stopping just before the threshold of her room. I want you to hear this from me, I said. Every time I got sick, every time I lost a client or missed a presentation, every night I sat alone in a hospital bed, you were there, smiling, pretending, taking notes. Still no response. But I saw it in her eyes. That flicker, that shift. The mask had finally cracked. Courtrooms are strange places. They don't just hold justice, they hold silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The kind where every truth is dragged into the light, and every lie dies choking. It took 6 months for the case to go to trial. By then, James and Nina had both been formally charged with attempted murder conspiracy and unlawful possession of controlled substances. The evidence was overwhelming, but even so, I wasn't prepared for how it would feel to face them in court. They looked smaller somehow, worn, stripped of their polish. James couldn't meet my eyes. Nina tried briefly, then looked away, her confidence crumbling like ash. The prosecution laid everything out piece by piece. The recordings, the toxicology results, the bottles found in James's desk, the digital logs from my phone detailing every incident. Even their text messages casually discussing my reaction timeline were read aloud for the jury. It was methodical, unforgiving, and devastating. Dr. Phillips gave the most damning testimony. Calm and clinical, she explained how the synthetic compound they used was originally developed for lab testing and not approved for human consumption. It accumulates, she told the courtroom. Over time, it weakens the nervous system, and in higher doses, as we found in the coffee that day, it can induce seizures, cardiac arrest, even death. There were audible gasps. But I didn't flinch. I sat tall, staring straight ahead, even when the defense tried to blame stress and psychosomatic symptoms. Even when they implied I'd exaggerated my illness to frame them. It was desperate, and the jury saw through it. They called it jealousy, but it was deeper than that. It was erasure. Nina had built her reputation on controlling every room she walked into. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone younger, faster, and more effective. And James. He just wanted proximity to power. When my light started shining brighter than hers, he picked a side. It wasn't mine. A week into the trial, Mendoza revealed a chilling detail I hadn't even known. There's evidence Nina may have done something similar to a former colleague, she testified, an intern who suddenly dropped out after a mysterious illness. She never pressed charges, but she submitted a statement after news of this case broke. The courtroom fell silent. I turned slowly toward Nina. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. They weren't just sabotaging me. They had a pattern. The closing argument from the prosecution was short and brutal. They didn't just try to hurt Mrs. Bennett, the prosecutor said. They studied her, tracked her reactions like scientists studying an experiment. And when she didn't break, they raised the dosage. This wasn't sabotage. This was attempted murder. I barely breathed as the jury filed back in, hours later with their verdict. Guilty, on all counts. Nina's jaw clenched. James exhaled as if he hadn't realized he was holding his breath. The judge didn't mince words in the sentencing. The premeditated nature of this crime, the sustained duration, and the clear escalation of harm leave this court no choice, she said firmly. You are each sentenced to the maximum term allowed under Tennessee law. When they were led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, neither of them looked at me. And I didn't need them to, because this wasn't about them anymore. It was about what they tried to steal: my health, my career, my future, and how I took it all back. Exactly 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, the same stage Nina once fought to keep me from reaching. I looked out at the sea of suits and eager eyes. Somewhere in the front row sat the Henderson client, smiling warmly. I want to talk to you about resilience, I said, my voice clear and even. Because sometimes the biggest threats to your success don't come from outside competition. They come from the people closest to you, the ones who say they love you. I let the words hang in the air, but surviving those challenges, I continued, doesn't just make you stronger. It makes you unstoppable. The applause was thunderous. Later, a young woman approached me bright-eyed, maybe mid-20s, and said, "How did you keep going? How did you stay calm while everyone around you was lying?" I smiled gently, because I trusted what I saw. I trusted my gut. And when that wasn't enough, I built a case no one could deny. That night, back in my apartment, I received an email from the Henderson team. They were renewing our contract for 3 more years. I laughed softly. Somewhere, in a Tennessee prison, Nina and James were just beginning their sentence. The local paper had run a small piece on it that morning. I didn't read it. Instead, I opened the pitch deck for my next client. Because the truth is, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's making them irrelevant. Some betrayals cut so deep you never really go back to who you were. But maybe that's the point. Maybe you're not supposed to. A few days after my speech at the conference, I found myself walking alone along the pedestrian bridge downtown, the same bridge James once proposed on. I hadn't been back since the trial. It was dusk, golden light spilling over the Cumberland River, cool breeze brushing past. For a long time, I'd thought of that bridge as a lie, a monument to a moment that meant nothing. But now, it just felt like a place. He couldn't touch the meaning anymore. I'd reclaimed that too. My phone buzzed with a new message from my firm's CEO. Incredible speech. We'd like you to mentor our new executive team." I smiled. And that's when it hit me James and Nina had tried to break me, not because I was weak, but because I wasn't. I was rising too fast, gaining too much respect, taking up space they believed belonged to them, and because I didn't apologize for it. After the trial, people asked me if I felt victorious. Victory isn't the word I use. The truth is, I felt free from the slow poison of doubt, from pretending not to notice how small they tried to make me feel, from all the second-guessing that came with every dismissive glance, every twisted smile. James had once said, "You're too intense, Christina, too focused." But that intensity, that focus, it saved my life, and I wasn't about to apologize for it anymore. A month after the sentencing, I started a side project, a confidential support group for professional women navigating toxic workplaces or family entanglements. It started as a small online forum. Today, it's a network of over 600 members across the country. We call it Unbreakable, because that's what we are. One night, I received a handwritten letter from someone I'd never met. It was from a woman named Tara, the intern. Nina allegedly sabotaged years ago. She wrote, "I saw your story. I recognize the patterns. I wasn't crazy. I just didn't have proof. But because of you, I finally feel seen." That letter shook me more than any courtroom testimony, because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was bigger. It was about every person who's ever been told they're too much, only to realize the world just wasn't ready for them yet. It was about every woman who's been smiled at while someone was quietly pulling the rug from beneath her. And it was about choosing again and again not to become what hurt you. Do I forgive them? I don't know. Maybe someday. Not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. What I do know is this. Every time they thought they'd silenced me, I listened harder. Every time they tried to weaken me, I grew stronger. And every time they underestimated me, they lost. I still have that backup phone, still have the audio files, the notes, the screenshots. Not because I plan to use them, but because they remind me of the version of me that refused to back down. The one who, even while shaking, stood her ground. She's still here, and she's not going anywhere. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever felt like the villain in someone else's story just because you dared to shine, know this. You don't need revenge to win. You just need to survive. And then rise, louder, braver, smarter, and unbreakable. So let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have supported you? Drop your story in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from scratch. And if you're new here, subscribe for more stories that remind you the people who tried to bury you didn't realize you were a seed.